Where each week I'm given a chance to talk about something that's close to my heart. Here on 12 News, we often find ourselves talking about the opioid crisis or the crisis of gun violence. But there's a crisis that doesn't get talked about nearly as often as it should. And when I heard the Pete Davidson story this week, that he had talked about leaving this earth, hinting at suicide, it was time to speak up. We have a mental health crisis in this country. It is really, really bad. And while there are likely many reasons that it's reached crisis proportions, one of the biggest is that people are ashamed to talk about it. They're afraid they'll be stigmatized or branded with some sort of a scarlet letter. In this country, if you have cancer or diabetes, you can go to work and people will sympathize with your plight. There's nothing embarrassing about having cancer or heart disease. We have telethons, fundraising walks, and charity galas designed to raise money for people suffering with it. But if you suffer with depression or anxiety or schizophrenia or PTSD, it's a different story. People suffer in shame and silence. Families oftentimes are forced to go it alone. Right now, today, more than 40 million adults and 17 million children are dealing with some sort of a mental illness. That's 1 in every 5 of us. And yet many, either because they can't find treatment or they can't afford it because many practitioners don't accept insurance or the wait is just too long, fall through the cracks. And then, exhausted with no hope for treatment, oftentimes suicide becomes the only form of relief. Whether it's that homeless person you see on the street, your son or your daughter or your coworker, we just have to do a better job and demand more from our healthcare system. We need more and better treatment options, and above all, we need to stop looking the other way. By the way, if you need help, the National Suicide Prevention Hotline is 1-800-273-8255.